The hills are alive to the sound of 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid engines. You know what I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Styria, which actually is in Austria. And this means it's the time for our Styrian Grand Prix preview on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. And so, on today's episode, we discuss what makes the Red Bull Ring such a good track for racing. Then, we discuss, is this the closest Red Bull versus Mercedes battle of the entire season coming up this weekend? After that, we discuss one dark horse driver in with a real shot here. Then, curb your enthusiasm, says Michael Massey. What is that all about? More on that on this episode. And finally, discussing the drama in the midfield where McLaren could suddenly have an advantage. All of this coming up on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. Well, hello there, folks. The hills will be alive this weekend. It will be some race weekend as we roll into the second round of this triple header that we're having right here. My name is Soumil Arora. You might recognize me from the Inside Line F1 podcast, as I like to say now, and at least in the more mainstream sense, from the driving force on Disney Plus Hotstar. But I am joined by a man who's been in Formula One for many, many years, who's worked as the ex-marketing head of the Force India Formula One team, and now works as a motorsport consultant to the VF Sport Network in Norway. Kunal Shah, as always, is here with me. And yes, Kunal, I'm so glad to be back in Austria. I mean, I'm not in Austria, neither are both of us, but so glad to see the circus rolling in town because this place always delivers. I don't think we've had one bad race here since we've come back.
Well, we've not. And, the hills are going to be alive for 2 consecutive Grand Prix weekends. We are right in the middle of the triple header. And, racing twice in Austria, no complaints. We did that last year. We opened the season with that. And we are racing twice, this weekend and the next one as well. But the one puzzling question that I have, Soumil, out of the several ones we are going to discuss is in 2020, we had the Austrian Grand Prix first, followed by the Styrian Grand Prix. Okay. Mm-hmm. In 2021, it's actually the Styrian Grand Prix, followed by the Austrian Grand Prix. And I want to know who makes these confusing decisions in Formula One or the local promoters, because hey, the sport is anyway just so confusing. Why have we changed the order of the races, even though Styria is in Austria and Austria has Styria, if you guys get to know what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. It's a bit like that Akshay Kumar meme, and for those of you who don't live in India and who haven't watched enough of Bollywood cinema, he basically puts both his fingers on one side, then flips it around, something like that. It's a big popular one here. Switcheroo is basically the essence of it. Comes out better when you end up seeing it, but it may be just that. Who even knows what it is all about? But thank goodness we're getting 2 of them here. Do I like to see that at the cost of Turkey and Canada not being a part? Maybe not, but am I still complaining about 2 Austrian races? Not one bit. Which leads us on to the very first thing that we have to speak about today, Kunal, and it is the track. Why is this circuit so good? Why is the Red Bull Ring so good for racing, and why have we not had even a single disappointing race ever here since we've come back? And I think it has a lot to do with just how few corners we have here and just what the nature of those corners are.
Soumil, and this is where I'm going to test your memory. Okay. And this is where my limited memory about F1 history comes in. But you are saying that we've not had a single boring race out here. And if my memory...
Since we came back.
Yeah, okay. I think in 2019, though, it was probably a boring race, if I remember correctly. No. Okay. Okay.
Because it was Verstappen and Leclerc dueling at the end, and Verstappen got his elbows out. I think it was that very race where we saw Max Verstappen transform into this brash young kid, into a proper evolved version of himself, if I put it that way, into more strong racecraft. That was the day.
That was actually a brilliant move for the lead of the race. And the only stat that I then remember from that race was that we actually had no retirements back then in Austria, which is a bit of a shocker because the Red Bull Ring, or the A1 Ring, as I've called it while growing up, was always known to be as a car breaker. And it's just something that I think last year the opening race had just 11 finishers again, if my memory serves me correctly. But yes, there is something about racing at the Red Bull Ring which enlivens me, or enlivens Formula One as well. To me, I actually call it the Wimbledon of Formula One. It is just a stunning Grand Prix. It's the most picturesque locales that a Formula One Grand Prix could have. And uh, since you mentioned corners, I think it's less than 10 corners,
Yeah.
out of which 3 corners are actually just flat kinks, as we call it in the world of racing. So lots and lots of fun action to look forward to this weekend.
I mean, if you ever want to know how you use kinks, that's how you do it. Tried, failed. But MotoGP counts it as 12 corners or something like that. I don't know. Bikes is not my forte, you can tell. But what's really fun about the Red Bull Ring Canal is the fact that most of those corners are hardcore braking zones, and they come after long straights where you can follow, where you can trail in, and you can make that move. Except around the outside of turn, is it 3? I think, yeah. Someone tried to make a move around the outside at turn number 3 in a blue car on Lewis Hamilton twice. Once at Sao Paulo, once here. Didn't work out well. He's not here on the grid right now. But apart from that particular corner, Kunal, everywhere more or less, you can go for a sin. And if you may be daring enough, which none of them will be, you can even do a MotoGP block pass at the final couple of corners if you dare to, because the sausage curbs over there have been removed as well. If, of course.
Yes, and Soumil, the circuit has just overtaken written all over it. You literally have a lot of heavy braking zones, and the circuit is very it's known for taxing the brakes out there, and then the higher altitude means cooling down the engines, and brakes are always a challenge. And I think just the first sector in itself is like completely out and out power sector. And again, if my numbers are correct, almost 73% of a lap is spent on full throttle, right? And to me, one of the most exciting things, and the one question that I would like to ask all our viewers and listeners is, Austria is the shortest lap time on the entire calendar, right? But it's only the fifth longest circuit, or the fifth longest circuit, right? The big question is, we saw a lap time of only 62 seconds last year, if I remember correctly again. But in France, we saw that between the Red Bull, Mercedes, and then the McLaren, there was a full minute's gap when it came to finishing the race. I'm talking of Lando Norris, of course. I'm eager to know what is that gap going to be in Austria when such a short circuit actually comes into play, Soumil.
Don't ask me. It's going to be crazy. Love when you bring out aspects like that kind of make you look at the sport in a different perspective. But to come to think of it, I don't think it may be that much, because last year Lando Norris was close again. The penalty was the reason why he got the podium towards the very end. Penalty to Hamilton, that is, of course. But he was still in a decent enough gap where he could go hell for leather and get it. So maybe if last year is anything to go by, things might be slightly easier on that aspect than Paul Ricard. But on the whole, Kunal, it just seems like the A1 ring, it's one of those circuits you think of as a kid, right? Okay, what do I draw? Straight up, right, straight down, right. I'll scribble a few corners here and there, 2 right-handers, and that's about it. But it still ends up getting some good racing. It's safe to say that we're pumped right here.
We are, and I think there's going to be. It is known that it's going to be a wet weather weekend, and we really hope that rain arrives at the time when we actually want to arrive, and sort of stirs things up. Because Soumil, both the title protagonists are known to be wet weather masters, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. And to sort of add a layer of wet weather racing in their ongoing battle is what I'm absolutely hoping happens this weekend and the next one.
Let's get to that and to speaking about how the teams and drivers, that is Red Bull and Mercedes, end up fighting. But you know what will happen if it's a wet race weekend? We may get a Manscaped lawnmower moment of the weekend. As you can see on the screen if you're watching the video version of it, we are offering, not we, Manscaped are offering, but it's kind of like it's we together because we're all doing this together, right? They're offering you a 20% discount plus free shipping on all of their products if you use the code TRIM inside. Check out the link in the description for more of that. That is where you can get all their products from. And while we're at it, let me tell you what kind of good work all of our writers are doing as well. Again, link in description. Check out all the good work that Nityanand and Parth and Sundaram have been doing. You can see on the screen right now the French GP data analysis where Nityanand dug up how Lewis Hamilton got passed by Max Verstappen even though he had a shorter pit stop. And of course, Parth writing the article of the other winners and losers from the French Grand Prix. That is on your screen. Check out the link in the description below for more on those articles. Back to the track, Kunal. And this wet weather thing, oh, it gets me excited because the forecast shows that there might be a storm on the way, not just in the skies, but on the track as well, because these two guys, Hamilton and Verstappen, are just going hell for leather right now.
They are. And, Aston Martin, they released an interesting stat that 5 out of the last 9 pole position battles was settled by a gap of just a tenth. So we know how close it is at front. And Soumil, if it's there are 2 buzzwords this weekend. First, of course, is rain, since we spoke about, and second is going to be finer margins. And it is increasingly getting finer by the races that go by. And in Austria, where it's a double header, teams will gather so much data. Everyone's expecting the teams and the competition to just get that much closer. So finer margins in literally every category that all the teams are racing on in Formula One this weekend, Soumil.
I'm intrigued, right? How fine can it get? How interesting can it eventually be? And when you come to think of it, historically, Mercedes have been superb here again. I think 2017 was theirs, 2018 was theirs, 2020 both of the races were theirs. They have been so good here. But Verstappen won here in 2019. Verstappen beat Mercedes clean with Red Bull at France as well. He seems to be the driver in the best nick of any series anywhere in the world at this stage. I might not be exaggerating right now when I say that. So, Kunal, the question. This just might be the closest fight between them of the season so far. But who would you put your money on? Because I certainly will be doing the fence-sitting option right here. I can't pick, to be honest.
Well, I think it's going to help everyone who's participating in our Grand Prix prediction competition, correct, I would say. But it's tough to look away from Max Verstappen, okay? Although if he gets pole, another stat out there, it's going to be only the first time in his career he scores back-to-back pole positions, right? So Max has been around a long time. He's waited a long time for the Red Bull Honda to package, for the Red Bull Honda package to become what it's actually become. So I expect them to carry forward that momentum. The slipstream, the toe is going to come into major effect in qualifying. So I think I will bet on Max Verstappen. And one of the reasons I do that, and I think I got it wrong in France when I was backing, Lewis Hamilton. But one of the reasons I do that is, just going by what Christian Horner said, France was an out and out Mercedes circuit. It was one of those traditional circuits after the 2 street races we've had. Red Bull, comprehensively outpaced and outclassed and beat Mercedes in France. And that's when Christian Horner said, if we can beat them here, we can beat them anywhere. And that's what has made me change sides of which side of the fence I am on, Soumil, to be very honest. So I'm going for a Max Verstappen pole and maybe a Max Verstappen win as well. But like I said, it's finer margins. So it's so tough to call it. Like in France, had the race been 2 laps short, Lewis would have won on a single stopper and all the maths that we all know now.
And in France, had Mercedes just slightly gone for a slightly different call in that case, maybe deciding that Lewis should pit immediately instead of a lap later. And I mean, you can't even tell, right? Because all the data that they had, all the calculations were put to bed by the rain that came in the morning. Split-second decisions that eventually cost them the win in the longer picture. I love how they're pushing each other to the limit. But experts say, now, again, you might doubt their credibility, you might doubt their legitimacy of their data, but that's what at least the global feed broadcast that comes at my TV channel ends up saying, that It seems like Mercedes are better on the longer stints, Kunal. Again, not my words, it's theirs. That's what they say. And Kunal mentioned a very good point to me early on before the start of this video that their viewpoints can change based on the data that comes in. So no reason to be concrete on that okay, Mercedes are better on the longer stints because, again, that can change. But historically, Austria that is, we've had longer tyre stints here. I mean, it's not really a high tyre wear circuit, not really a high tyre degradation circuit per se. So do you think that sort of changes the competitive balance in terms of strategy somewhere? Because now that the focus will be slightly off strategy, maybe that could just benefit Mercedes considering how that has not been their strong point this season at all.
It could well be, but I'll put it this way, Soumil. We eventually will have at least one stop in the race. That's what Pirelli is saying, and that's what the rules say. You have to stop once. You have to use at least 2 compounds in the race as we know it. So it's just that one stop that could still turn around Mercedes's fortunes as we've seen before. And, in Monaco, in Baku, and in France, Mercedes had, a race strategy which saw them lose positions in the pit stop. So it's still the one stop that they need to master, Soumil. And I'll put it this way, that it's all going to be down to how teams are optimizing their tire utilization. And, one of the big challenges Mercedes has faced is tire warm-up. In Monaco, it was Bottas who could get the tires in the window. In Baku, it was Lewis. In France, it was actually both their drivers. So they'd be hoping that A, both their drivers are on the pace, and that B, they actually have the pace advantage to at least try and take the fight to Red Bull. And I just noticed how the whole narrative has changed. Will Mercedes have the advantage to take the fight to Red Bull? It's usually the other way around, Soumil.
It's crazy. But I'll have to ask you one question, Kunal, that has been on my mind for the last week or so, but it's not been as prevalent. Again, now that we have the opportunity, before we move on to the other things, we can discuss this for a second. The chassis business, what's happening right there? Apparently, Mercedes changing chassis? Is that how you say it in a brutal way? I don't know. Having swapped around the chassis of the car, you have seen Bottas kind of get better, at least on the overall pace. I mean, one might wonder where he might have finished had it not been for the strategy issue that happened to Paul Ricard. But do you think that has anything to do with Mercedes and their drivers' pace as such at this moment?
Oh, I don't think so. And Lewis has, addressed this with much authority. And it's something that, we've known teams to do time and again for mileage reasons. And this year, the budget cap is also one of the reasons why the teams will, circle and service parts along the way. So I don't think it's the chassis thing anymore. And it's interesting that you mentioned Bottas because, again, this one is where I miss Sundaram most on. But I think Bottas's maximum poles have come in Austria and maybe Russia, like you said before we started recording this episode, Soumil. So Bottas has been in tremendous form when it comes to Austria. I think in the last 5 races, he's had 3 poles and 2 wins and something. And I'm excited to see if he can actually do something of this, and if he can somewhat interfere in the Verstappen versus Hamilton title battle out there.
That was exactly what we're going to come up to right now. If Valtteri Bottas can be the dark horse with a real shot, because something or the other happens, and Bottas eventually ends up being quite good at Austria. I wonder what it is. I wonder what it is with Bottas at Russia and Austria, but the records don't lie. The numbers don't lie, Kunal. It is evident for everyone to see. He's got something in the bag at Austria. And seemingly when he's under pressure, when he's under fire from team-based decisions, maybe at the end of the season where they decide should we renew or not, and they just renew him by the skin of their teeth, or maybe in a situation like this one where he has called out the team for giving him the wrong strategy, in hindsight that is, something or the other happens in Bottas. There is that fire lighting up. Now, just to clear things up, Toto Wolff and Bottas have both come up and said that there is no acrimony within the team. Everything is okay. The relationship is still very much the same, but the same was never very good, Kunal. So, do you think we might see him have a chance? And maybe this could put Sergio Perez under pressure, because we've constantly seen him do those sort of weird longer stints, but we can't help but point out the fact that Perez, in qualifying at least, is just not there, which means he has to go the long way around. He has to do the dirty work. and he eventually ends up being in second or third at the max. And the one big victory, of course, luck being on his side.
Yeah, I think one powerful boost Bottas will have this weekend is, what Lewis said in the press conference earlier today. He says, I'm discussing my contract renewal with Mercedes as we go, and I would love to have Valtteri Bottas as my teammate. So that is something that he would look to go. But you mentioned Perez, and, it was good to see Perez come to Max's help in France. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how close Perez can be on the Saturday, because on the Sunday he's definitely been scoring all the points and being there in the mix, and now it just it just waits. We just wait to see how much closer can he get to Max Verstappen in qualifying. And before we sort of move on to from that, there are 8 other teams to sort of talk about and lots of other battles to talk about. The one thing that I've loved in the last 3 to 5 races is that Red Bull and Mercedes have been fighting on every aspect of a Grand Prix weekend. Whether it's qualifying, whether it's pole position, whether it's race strategy, whether it's the race win. So in fact, even the fastest lap of the race, So we have 2 teams that are extremely competitive. They're very, very well matched, I would say, in terms of performance. And the finer margins is what is going to separate them through the season. And the team that makes the least amount of mistakes, as we've been calling it, right? But the one thing that stands out for me is the nature of Red Bull's win in France last weekend, right? It's that kind of strategy mixed with on-track risk, on-track battles that we want to see all about in Formula One. And to me, if Formula One delivers that this weekend as well, it's going to be a blockbuster race, irrespective of who actually wins, Soumil.
Spot on, literally, right? We've all not got any hate for Lewis Hamilton. Some of you might. Again, that's your problem. I don't get why. But it's mostly because someone, be it a Schumacher back in the day, or be it a Hamilton today, or be it in the world of cricket, Mumbai Indians, you can tell I'm a fan. When someone wins too much, you sort of get that sort of feeling of bitterness in your mouth, that they win too often. It takes away the charm of winning. But again, when a competitor arrives, it just builds it up so much more. Verstappen is the man. But I think it's enough of talking about the top 2. It's been 22 minutes since we've been speaking about Mercedes and Red Bull racing. That's how compelling this battle is. But now for the midfield. Now for all the action that's happening right there. Advantage McLaren in the tennis terms is what the umpire might say. Do we have advantage McLaren though, Kunal? Because Austria, again, last year they got a podium right here. From the characteristic standpoint, this might be their circuit. They have favoured longer straights all season long. And medium speed corners like we do have in section 2 and 3 do seem to be favouring them, at least so far this season. What do you reckon is going to happen here? And what about AlphaTauri and Pierre Gasly, who've just been racking up points weekend after weekend?
Well, okay, I'll put it this way, that maybe Ferrari will struggle less in Austria than they did in France.
Yeah.
Shorter circuit, lack of fast sweeping corners, and long straights and the like. So Ferrari might just struggle less when it comes to a pace deficit. But the big challenge is in the middle of a triple header, they've realized that, tire issues that they've been struggling from for the last 2 years are still prevalent on their car. And, if they couldn't solve it for the last 2 seasons, I don't know how they're going to solve it for in like literally 4 days or 5 days between the races that they would have. But on a more serious note, they get 2 chances to try different solutions in the same circuit, and that always helps, right? And there's that famous saying that says, right, if you do the same thing and expect different results, you're kind of stupid. So I'm assuming that Ferrari will try different things, and then if they end up with the same result, it's still okay, right? But the interesting thing for me in the whole McLaren versus Ferrari battle, Soumil, is that Ferrari are always ahead in qualifying. Okay, that's always been something that Ferrari have pulled out. But McLaren have better baseline performance in the races, whereas Ferrari have had these spikes in their performances out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. And, I think it's very nostalgic to see Ferrari and McLaren battle. And, adding a Pierre Gasly and AlphaTauri to the mix is always good. I think Norris is the only driver who scored in all the races this season, and Pierre Gasly has been scoring points in the last 6 races, after his incident in Bahrain. So very, very competitive midfield out there, I would say. And sometimes I wonder, is Alpha Tauri quick enough, or do we think that they are quick enough? Because they're always there, but they're not always there in the fight. So happy to see what Pierre Gasly is going to be able to make of it.
I think we sort of mean that we can't quite tell on the whole front because there's only one of those two cars right there, sadly. I mean, again, when you see two drivers right there in the same car, you kind of. It's like a second opinion, right? You go to a doctor, you ask a second one, that's when you're sure of it. We don't know what that Alpha Tauri car is capable of on a balance front. Again, you might wonder what is a balance front. Maybe the aggregate or the average of the two teammates. Then depends on how good the teammates are. I mean, if you put Yuji Ide and for that matter, who's another not very successful Formula One driver that wasn't very good outside either. I mean, you get the idea. If you put two of them in, if you put them in a Ferrari, it might just give you. By the method that I'm suggesting, the car might be bad. Again, it's all complicated stuff. What I mean to say is, we need Yuki Tsunoda to do something better. We need him to be a lot more representative in that aspect to know whether that Alpha Tauri is in fact a genuine contender for Ferrari or McLaren. Are they just, being a floater in a cricket match, coming across sometimes, hitting a big hit and then getting out on the sixth ball? We might have to wait and watch on that aspect. But one very interesting article that I read over the week spoke about Ferrari's problems and why they're able to trump McLaren in qualifying. So Paul Ricard was a good example. I'm not going to consider Monaco and Baku because those were two outliers that completely fit into Ferrari's game plan. But at Paul Ricard, Ferrari eventually tried a race pace setup in free practice apparently that was a bit too slow on qualifying trim. So they said, okay, this is a bit too much. Let me cut it down by a fair bit, or let us cut it down by a fair bit would be a better term. And so they did. It came up to be a very, very good qualifying trim setup, but something that just went away from their favour in the race. The result was evident. I think Sundaram mentioned in his stats review article that the worst Ferrari finish since, was it 89, 87, something like that, Kunal? No?
78 French Grand Prix, wasn't it? Or something. Some really long time.
Yeah.
Since Ferrari were, being Ferrari, I would say.
Exactly. So you never know which way things are going to go. But yeah, as Kunal, you rightly mentioned, maybe struggling a bit less than as they did in Paul Ricard. But on the front, Ferrari are on an average dropping 2 positions in every race. McLaren on an average are gaining 2 positions every race. I'm intrigued. But what about Aston Martin? Finally, before we move on to the final point, what about Aston Martin?
I was just going to say, in all of this, Aston Martin has been, on the upward trajectory after a tough start to the season. Sebastian Vettel, he loves Austria. He's always been in the points every time he's finished out here. And he will be wanting to make the most of A, the momentum, and B, the reverse strategy that they've been making work for the last couple of races, I would say, right? So Aston Martin being in the mix would be great. Fernando Alonso, Alpine, Esteban Ocon, they've traditionally not had a great, they historically haven't been as strong out here as well. But again, this is what makes the midfield most exciting. And Soumil, in the midfield, I will say this, the battle that I am cheering for the most is Haas versus Williams, right? Yes. So 9th team has actually scored points or will score points this season. I don't know. I'm not Nostradamus, okay?
Kubica did
but
in Hockenheim 2019. So
in
a car that was 4 seconds slower than everyone that year. So anything can happen.
Yes, anything can happen, right? And so we within the whole Haas and Williams battle, it's about who actually finishes higher in the non-point scoring finishes. So while you and I don't bother to look who's 11th and lower, the other one's always looking, okay, who's 11th and lower, and are we sort of ahead of them? And George Russell's P12 in France, which by the way was fantastic in a race where there were no retirements, right? His P12 helped Williams jump Haas in the Constructors' Championship. So Williams is 9th, Haas is 10th. And I would love to see how this battle turns around, in Austria, the 2 races we have. And also, Mick Schumacher made it to Q2 for the first time in his Formula One career. So a fair bit to look forward to even at the back end of the grid.
Made it, but didn't start it. Again, we have to wonder, could he have made it had it not been for that crash? And had Lance Stroll not been compromised? Again, that's a different question. But That seven-figure sums added to Williams' budget at the end of the year if they keep that position. And it reminds me of a very popular Hindi meme that came from the movie Three Idiots. There were two. I'm not going to explain the whole thing. It just said "Niche se check," which means check from the bottom of the results list. That's what Haas and Williams are having to do this year. But it works for them. I think Williams have solidified that position. Finally, Kunal, before we wrap up, before we end up, there is one final point that we have to discuss. And Michael Massey has been at the forefront of that. It is curb your enthusiasm, says Michael Massey. I like that line so much that I've been saying it so many times today. I just love it. But they've been really firm with that. Turn to at Paul Ricard. Teams literally said that we don't want those curbs. They're giving us hundreds and thousands of euros worth of damage. Remove them. Michael Massey was as firm as he could be. He said, no, the curbs did not go away at turn 2 at Paul Ricard. Yes, Austria has had the turn 8 and turn 9 curbs, sausage curbs removed, but that was last year before Michael Massey, properly took control of Formula 1. Now, he's not taking off any of those sausage curbs at the track as well. And you know what happened last year? Mercedes almost retired both their cars because of the excessive vibrations causing the gearbox to be rattled. So, how much of a problem is that going to be here, Kunal?
It's always going to be a problem. The circuit characteristics are such that if you don't obey track limits, and by Michael Massey's track limits is literally the white line being the boundary.
Oh, yes.
You could end up with some serious car damage. You could end up, crashing. And thankfully, at least in the last two, right-handers, he's removed the curbs between those corners, right? So that's in some way a respite, because we've seen several drivers overcook it and then go off because they are just spectators in their cars, right? Yeah. So I think curb your enthusiasm is perfect, and I know why you've used it as the subject line in your newsletter as well. That's going to go out to over 1,000 people, tomorrow morning, Soumil. But I think that curbs should just be as it is, and yes, not in places where they could cause car damage, but hey guys, why do you take your cars in those places where you could cause damage? That's one way of looking at it. So excited to see how we go through these two weekends, Soumil. And my last point is that A1 ring, or the Red Bull ring, like I said, I grew up calling it the A1 ring, right? Herman Tilke designed circuit. I wonder if the A1 telecom guys who actually got the circuit redesigned paid Herman a little more to design this classier circuit than the sheikhs in Abu Dhabi.
I think it just depends on the client, because the A1 ring guys were not looking for the most outstanding testing facility and a tourist circuit. Man, people come to Austria either way. I would go to Austria if there was no circuit there as well, because the hills are so beautiful and the air is clean and there's electric cars and everything. But you need more flashy stuff over there, and flashy stuff sometimes results in bad racing. Good on Abu Dhabi trying to make those changes. Come on, your turn, Jeddah. Put up a good race. But that's it for today. That is it for our Styrian GP preview. I was almost about to say Austrian, and I hope it's going to be a good one. Catch us on Sunday evening or Monday morning. I mean, it's going to be very late Sunday evening, right? So Monday morning, check out the review episode for the Styrian Grand Prix on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. See you there, folks. I hope you had a good time watching and listening to this.
Thank you, Soumil, and see you guys in the middle of the second and third race of the triple header.
Oh, yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.